Hello, welcome to this presentation about the theory of the Phoenician origin of the Greek alphabet. With few exceptions, linguists and writing system specialists generally agree with Herodotus's thesis that the alphabet was introduced to the Greeks by the Phoenicians. The debate currently centers on the historical period when this occurred. The geographical origin of the letters is seldom questioned. But who were those Phoenicians? The Phoenician myths are significant because they describe the technology and purposes of writing. These myths consist of neologisms created to explain the development of the alphabet and its introduction to Greece. The term Phoenicians first appears in Homer's Odyssey. For example, upon his arrival in Ithaca, Odysseus asks the swineherd Eumaeus where he comes from. Eumaeus recounts that he hails from an island called Syre. His father, a wealthy man, had a Phoenician woman in his household. She fell in love with one of the greedy Phoenician knaves who had landed on the island. The Phoenician sailors took him and the woman aboard their boat. They threw the woman into the sea, but he escaped and reached Ithaca, where he served Odysseus's father, Laertes. Of course, the Phoenicians lived in Phoenicia. Homer describes them as famed seamen, crafty merchants known for their goods, and greedy knaves who trade and sometimes kidnap women and children, but he never specifies their homeland in geographical terms. We do not know the location of Homeric Phoenicia. The Syre island, which sounds like Syros or Syria, and is sometimes translated as Syria, is the homeland of Eumaeus, not the Phoenicians. According to Homer, Syre, Syria, or Syros is situated above Ortygia, which Strabo identifies as the island of Delos or Rhenea in the Aegean island cluster known as the Cyclades. Thucydides, writing approximately 3 centuries after Homer and contemporaneously with Herodotus, characterizes the Phoenicians primarily as a maritime people and islanders engaged in piracy, marked by constant mobility. In his narrative, he depicts the Phoenicians as a seafaring population, more closely tied to naval activity than to any stable territorial base. References to the Phoenicians in Thucydides are consistently associated with maritime endeavors and piracy. Thucydides consistently uses various Greek adjectives, indistinguishably translated in English as Phoenician, to qualify a fleet or ships. A Phoenician fleet could have meant a commercial or pirate fleet in his time. Nevertheless, in his original Greek text, he never uses the same adjective as Herodotus does for his Phoenician letters. Like Homer, Thucydides references Phoenicia only once, lacking useful geographical precision. Notably, piracy continues to be practiced in the region of the Red Sea, particularly around the coast of Eritrea, where numerous islands provide natural harbors for pirate vessels. This modern context invites 2 intriguing hypotheses regarding the historical identity of the Phoenicians. The first posits that the term Phoenicians in Thucydides may refer to seafaring traders navigating along any coastline, which is why it is called a Phoenician coast. By the way, the English terms cost and coast may have a historical connection. Cost would refer to the distance of the coast crossed, partially determining the price of the traded goods. After a long isolation in their boats and in the absence of strict international laws, sailors are tempted to misbehave when they reach a port. Under this interpretation, the ethnonym Phoenician might derive by association from the name of the Red Sea, translated into Greek with the equivalent stem phoenix. Ultimately, it may even share a conceptual link with the English terms road, route, and raid, as we will see in a moment. It so happened that the first civilization to develop maritime trade and piracy in the Middle East was the Egyptians, and these activities were first developed in the Red Sea for the internal needs of Egypt. Thus, a Phoenician would be a commercial seafarer, occasionally turning malicious. It would be a profession first developed in the Red Sea. Once the name of the profession was coined, anyone could be a Phoenician, regardless of their origin, whether Egyptian, Syrian, Carian, Greek, or Iberian. The notion that the Phoenicians invented the alphabet could imply that the merchants invented the alphabet for commercial purposes. The second hypothesis posits that the Phoenicians, as pirates, are identical to the sea peoples mentioned in Egyptian records. Some scholars have implicated these groups in the widespread collapse of Bronze Age urban centers, the depopulation of coastal areas, and the relocation of settlements to elevated, defensible terrain, such as hilltops and mountain slopes. However, this hypothesis will not be considered in this context. The late Egyptian word rwd, pronounced like rude or rudes, meant shore. In different conversation contexts, rudes may have been interpreted as a route, road, raid, or the Red Sea, referring to the shoreline used as a commercial route, which had nothing to do with the color of the waters. In Greek, rudes was phonetically close to Ruth and associated with the word eruthros, meaning red. In French, rudes became rouge, also meaning red. The Greek name Erythrea, which was phonetically reduced to Eritrea in Italian, contains many consecutive significant letter clusters. Eri is associated with transport, wreath, with rhythmic movement like rowing. Erythra is the blushing color of toil. Thra is about breaking down. Re is about sinking. And Iar is the exclamation for a horrid, lamentable situation. As we semantically scan the word Erythrea from left to right, we encounter the sememes of rhythmic transport, the red skin of toil, wreckage, and a dreary, lamentable event. Erythrea is a lamentable wreck after the toil of rowing for transport. It was a zone of frequent transport wrecks, perhaps even more so around the islands of Eritrea, due to pirate activity. However, since Erythra is the longest matched stem and means red, people associate Erythrea with the color red, hence the name of the Red Sea. In short, Erythrea means a calamity for maritime transport and is a partial homophone of erythra, meaning red. The poetic translation using the Greek stem phen for blood red renders the color of blood and death associated with piracy. From phen, we get phoenix and Phoenician. But this Phoenician is the pejorative term for seafaring traders practicing piracy. It is unlikely that the Phoenician letters are related to the pirates, to blood, or to death. The confusion is due to poor understanding of the adjective Phoenicia, referring to letters, by Herodotus or subsequent translators. Only in the 1st century AD, approximately 5 centuries after Herodotus, did Strabo, Pliny, and contemporary authors attribute a geographical identity to Phoenicia and use Phoenicians as an ethnonym. This is about a millennium after the creation of the Phoenician alphabet. In his Natural History, Pliny divides the greater area of Syria into smaller regions. He defines Phoenicia and its neighboring countries with some geographical precision, and, following Herodotus, associates the Phoenicians with the discovery of the alphabet. In his famous passage on the origin of the Greek letters, Herodotus does not provide evidence, but explicitly expresses his opinion. As I think, suppose, imagine, he says, the alphabet had been unknown to the Greeks before. He explains that he saw the Phoenician letters himself, written on 3 tripods. He was able to read, understand, and interpret them. But did he speak Phoenician? It is likely that the so-called Phoenician letters were actually Greek, and Herodotus confused two similar terms. At the very beginning of his book, Herodotus introduces the Phoenicians. As the Phoenicians themselves claim, he says, they originate from the Red Sea. He describes a typical example of their behavior as merchants, pirates, and kidnappers, exemplified by Eumaeus in Homer, but on a larger scale. Much later in his book, he reaffirms his conviction that the Phoenicians originated from the Red Sea. Just before expressing his opinion about the origin of the Greek alphabet, Herodotus introduces the Gephyreans. He states they claim to come from Eretria, but according to his research, they are actually Phoenicians. He may be confusing Eretria with Eretria, the location by the Red Sea where the Phoenicians originated, as he suggests. Eretria is situated very close to the Strait of Euripus, a 38-meter-wide channel of water that separates the Greek island of Euboea in the Aegean Sea from Boeotia on the mainland of Greece. The channel has been bridged several times throughout history. It is conceivable that the Gephyreans, meaning the bridge people, lived near a bridge, and in that time, a bridge over the Euripus would have been a technological achievement worthy of naming a people after. They might also not be a tribe, but rather a profession, such as bridge builders, who happen to come from the nearest city of Eretria or Boeotia. Although Herodotus is a pillar of Greek literature, one should not forget that he was a Carian and probably had a greater affinity with the Phoenicians for the reasons mentioned by Thucydides than with continental Greeks. Plutarch harshly criticized Herodotus in his essay On the Malice of Herodotus. This essay is one of Plutarch's most unusual and aggressive works, in which he accuses Herodotus of anti-Greek bias, unfairness, and even malicious intent in his histories. The term Eretria consists of two readily identifiable stems. Ere comes from ere-o and means to ask, inquire, seek, question, search, explore. Tria is found in triazo, meaning to conquer or vanquish. It all reads to conquer by inquiry and research. In the mythological context, Eretria, the place from which the bridge builders claim to have come, was not a city but a higher education and research campus. Herodotus was right to redefine the Gephyreans as Phoenicians, but in the sense that we will discover below. We do not know whether Herodotus was confused, malicious, or misunderstood. We should not uncritically rely on current dictionaries and assume that we perfectly understand ancient Greek. Unlike Thucydides, who applies a historiographical style throughout his work, Herodotus mixes history with legend and myth. In his histories, the Gephyreans and other Phoenicians who came to Greece were led by Cadmus. Homer also mentions Cadmus once, but he had already referred to the inhabitants of Thebes with the name Cadmeans. The original homeland of Cadmus has been a subject of debate in modern scholarship for a long time, based on archaeological, epigraphical, literary, and historical evidence. Many other ancient writers refer to Cadmus as a mythological figure, as he is said to have descended from deities. Cadmus's grandfather was Poseidon. One of his remote ancestors was Zeus himself, and one of his descendants was Dionysus. His wife, Harmonia, was also a deity. His sister Europa, the Phoenician princess from Tyre, was abducted by Zeus, who transformed into a bull. They crossed the eastern Mediterranean and gave birth to King Minos of Crete, along with his brothers Sarpedon and Rhadamanthus. According to Herodotus, citing the Persians, it was the Greeks, and more specifically the Cretans, who carried off Europa. But let us keep in mind Cadmus's nuclear family members and his wife, for further analysis. Furthermore, pottery artists illustrate Cadmus interacting with deities and mythical beasts. Here, we see the goddess Athena, or a dragon. A reasonable question would be whether the personage of Cadmus mentioned by Herodotus is the same as that of the other authors. Modern scholars agree that Herodotus's Cadmus and the mythological Cadmus are the exact figure, just interpreted differently depending on whether you're telling history or myth, even though Cadmus may sometimes appear as the son of Agenor and sometimes as the son of Phoenix. Whatever the details, Cadmus always comes from Phoenicia. He migrated to Boeotia in Greece, and he is connected to the foundation of Thebes. The name Cadmus is rare and quite distinctive. Nobody has ever mentioned that there is more than one Cadmus in ancient literature. Herodotus and many later writers also referred to the alphabetic letters as Cadmean letters after Cadmus introduced them to Greece. With this opportunity, we must dissociate any scholarly discussion on the origin of the alphabet from the racist Nazi movement, the Aryan origin theories, and the anti-Semitism of the 20th century. In Greek, the stem kad is derived from kaidos, meaning jar or earthenware vessel. The Ionians used the word kaidos as a measure or a measuring pot. The cluster dm initiates the word dmesis for taming, domesticating, or breaking. The central cluster adm forms the Greek word admis, meaning unbroken, hence intact. The sequence kadm refers therefore to a domestic jar or vessel, a broken or unbroken piece of earthenware, or collectively a divided vessel used for measuring. The stem kd also exists in Aramaic. It is pronounced kads or kada and means vessel or pot, as in Greek. Adm means atom, blood, or to cut in pieces, dismember, while kdm means jeweler. The sememes, to cut in pieces or dismember, are similar to those of demesis, which involves breaking or cutting, and they are also related to measuring. Cadmus, understood as a domestic jar or a divided vessel for measuring liquids or grain, might have been introduced by the Phoenicians, or the seafarer merchants, as we would call them today. The jewelers could have also embarked on a ship with other merchants to sell their trinkets, in Homer's words. In late Egyptian, dm means to sharpen. It may also evoke cutting in pieces, but there is no lexical evidence for the other letter clusters. Harmonia, derived from the verb armozo, is a mythical deity representing the abstract concept of harmony, known to pupils as the act of matching or joining objects together. In antiquity, this concept was primarily applied to music, manufacturing, decoration, the arts, and society in general, just as it is today. The idea of artistic harmony aligns well with that of Cadmus as a professional jeweler. However, the linguistic morphology of mythological terms can often be deceptive. Additionally, ancient societies faced other survival challenges that needed to be addressed first. Harmonia can instead be interpreted as ARM, followed by MON and ONIA. A coherent sense of arm is in armor, meaning food, burden, load. Similarly, mon forms monas, meaning unit, and onia is the plural of an independent word, meaning the most useful, serviceable. A homophone spelling variant of onia means goods for sale, market wares to be bought. These consecutive sememes summarize a food load unit for the most valuable goods to sell or buy. Harmonia is the abstract notion of a volume or mass unit for food and other valuable goods sold in the market. She marries Cadmus, an earthenware vessel used to measure a unit of volume for liquid or semi-solid foods, such as oil, grains, powders, dairy products, and other marketable goods. The basic meaning of harmonia, like that of harmony, is a measure. Her marriage to Cadmus, which refers to a vessel with divisions, implies the conceptual fusion of measuring with a scaled vessel. The couple refers to a measuring vessel. If we correctly understand the meanings of Cadmus as a vessel with divisions and harmonia as a unit of volume or mass, we can predict the properties of their children. The children should also be vessels of standard capacities for various uses. Ino may be derived from the verb inio, which means to empty, carry off by evacuations, or clear out. It should be a small vessel, such as a bucket, for emptying a larger, immovable container like a well or a reservoir. Reading ino from right to left reveals the root of the word for buying or selling, oni. Like her mother Harmonia, ino relates to measuring, specifically in the context of buying and selling. It likely refers to a standard measuring vessel. The inversion of the letter sequence yields opposing concepts, one of a commercial operation and the other of a tool that facilitates it. Semele is a fusion of seme and mele. The second stem is an independent word, glossed as a sort of cup. Seme matches the hapax legomenon semane, glossed as seme, which means sprinkled, sown, strewn. This adjective refers to a field strewn with small, identical charges. One needs a small, standard volume container to achieve a homogeneous light sowing. Semele, which also matches semen, would be a small vessel for uniform sowing. Although semen derivatives are abundant in Romance and Germanic languages, no such word is found in Greek. There might have been a scribal error at some point in history. A scribe may have misinterpreted the eta of Simeon or Sema with a phonetically similar e. In that case, semele would be a cup with volume marks or signs. The seme or semen hypothesis is preferred because semele is the mother of Dionysus, who is also related to wine and reproduction. Polydorus consists of pol and eudor, or the prefix hydro for water. Pol corresponds to the verb poleo, meaning to go about, range over, revolve, turn around. It is the same verb that produces polis, a city. Therefore, Polydorus resembles a water vessel with which one goes about, ranges over, or revolves. That could be a water flask or a watering can. Had Polydorus been spelt with an omega, it would be derived from a homophone verb, poleo, meaning to sell or offer for sale, carry on business, trade, deal with one, retail. In that case, the term would refer to a profession, the profession of the ambulant water carrier. Agave is a fusion of ego with alpha, upsilon, eta, a word pronounced avi, meaning dry. Among the many meanings of the verb ago, the most pertinent are to carry, as a cargo, keep, or weigh. The vessel agave was designed for carrying, keeping, or weighing dry food products. The fifth child of Cadmus with Harmonia, Autonoe, is the only one for whom Hesiod mentions a consort. It may be that Autonoe could be confused with the cognates of auto, self, and noesis, thought, such as to think for oneself, self-evident, etc. The fine morphology of Autonoe suggests a deliberately designed device, akin to a rope, cord, or cable for tightening and raising objects. The long-haired Aristeas appears to confirm and emphasize the notions of a long-haired rope, its use for binding and tightening, and its resistance to stretch and tension. One hypothesis could be that Autonoe and Aristeas are not vessels but string devices bound to vessels, with or without a nose, using a self-tightening noose to raise or weigh loads. A more compelling hypothesis is that Hesiod mentions them as a couple because autonoe and aristeas are inseparable. They form a system in which the parts do not exist or function independently of each other. A cunning device evoked by the rope-like properties of autonoe, the erection and the exaggerated nose of Aristeas, considered together within the vessel context of Cadmus's family, is the oil lamp with a wick. The rare Greek term cadmia is more commonly known as cadmia in late Latin. It is glossed as calamine, a deposit of zinc oxide residues on the interior surface of furnace chimneys. Undoubtedly, it was known to copper metallurgists, at least as far back as Pedanius Dioscorides, a Greek physician, pharmacologist, and botanist who reported it in the 1st century AD. The term probably originates from the Bronze Age. It consists of cad from kados, an earthenware vessel or jar, and mia. The stem mia may come from mieno, to stain, taint, defile, sully. Thus, cadmia would be a stain used on vessels or flat surfaces, similar to the soot deposited from flames. The adjective qualifying the letters is cadmeia. The ending eta iota alpha is a Homeric word meaning food, provisions for a journey, supplies for traveling. When combined with cadam, a divided vessel, cadmeia is predicted to mean a vessel with divisions for food selling, or an earthenware jar for food storage. Such vessels would feature division signs or content labels. Cadmean letters would then be those signs drawn on pottery for volume measurement or content identification. It is likely that this is how the merchants, then known as Phoenicians, began developing the alphabet. There is no notion of ethnicity in those words. The stem eia does not exist in Aramaic or Egyptian. It is likely of Greek origin. When the adjective was applied to the Boeotian earth, it may have signified the earth, or clay used in pottery, or a fertile valley that produced enough food for storage and sale. Now, let us take a moment to explore how simple graphics can evolve into iconic letters with meaning, and introduce some concepts of literal semantics and the principle of opposition by inversion. A short vertical line can intuitively denote counting, one line for one count, two lines for two, and so on. This little vertical line can symbolize the smallest count, the smallest thing, the one. Thus, a short vertical line evolves into a symbol of the smallest thing. The smallest thing is represented by the letter I, a short vertical line. The ending morpheme os means that thing which. By joining the letter I with the ending morpheme os, we arrive at ios. Literally, ios signifies that thing which is the smallest, akin to the number 1. The Homeric word ios means 1. A horizontal line can also be represented by an I if it is short, resembling a dash. In Homer, ios adopts a different tonic accent to denote an arrow, dart, dash, or a brief flight or run. How about a long run? A longer distance can be represented by a horizontal line marked by a short vertical line at each end. The intersecting vertical lines, resembling plus signs, define the start and end points. The distance graphics can be abstracted using the letter h or eta in Greek, which then signifies a sememe of length. We arrive at the same conclusion by examining the semantic pair of ios with eta, ios. If the latter means far darting, and the former means just a dart, then eta denotes far, long, or some considerable length. By inverting the order of eta and iota, we obtain the initial cluster iota eta of the verb emi, which means to let go, throw, or send. There is some opposition between these sememes and the related notion of distance, at least to trigger a motion and the distance traveled lie on different ends of the same semantic field. This is not a coincidence. It is observed so frequently that we can call it a principle of linguistics, the principle of semantic opposition by letter inversion. Sometimes the opposition is outright antinomy, as seen in the contrast between hoplites, soldiers, and polites, civilians. We likely need to conduct further research when we find a case where this principle does not apply. The letter alpha resembles a partially consumed pile. The name alpha is a cognate of half, which in Old English meant a part, not necessarily of equal division. The original sense of half is preserved in behalf. However, the shape and semantics of alpha are the subject of a dedicated presentation. The ending morpheme of Cadmea contains the notions of long-distance provisions in its three constituent letters. The meaning of a word is a holistic summary of all the sememes encountered through semantic scanning, including those of individual letters. No sememe should be disregarded. Given that a sequence of letters can be divided and interpreted in various ways, a term can reveal multifaceted semantic aspects and can be employed in different contexts with superficially distinct meanings. Readers may select the meaning that best fits the context while enriching their understanding with the entire historical semantic background provided by dictionaries. The stem EIA represents the typical plural neuter form of the Homeric eos, glossed as an epithet of Apollo, the archer, meaning far-darting. This is akin to far-traveling of a dart. The derivation of this term from the verb eimi was suggested by Aristarchus of Samothrace, a grammarian from the 3rd to 2nd century BC and head librarian of the Library of Alexandria, noted as the most influential of all scholars of Homeric poetry. Among the meanings of this verb, we find to utter, speak. When combined with cadm, from Cadmus and Cadmea, EIA adds a speaking sememe to pottery smudges. Cadmea grammata, the Cadmean letters, refers to pottery smudges with phonetic value, that is, alphabetic writing. Consider the example of the word academia, referring to Plato's academy, a public gymnasium, a public school, or today, an academic institution. It is phonetically and graphically very similar to Cadmea. Academia employs the ending ia, although it converts the Homeric eta into a classic epsilon. This conversion occurs frequently enough to have been noted by Plato in Cratylus. This ending now signifies a lifelong journey, a preparation for life, while retaining the speech sememe. The stem me points to youth, while the initial sequences of the word introduce notions of good speech, perhaps also that of silent writing, and the term's middle relates to a professional, paid, public function. In mythology, a family tree is a classification system or a type of ontology, similar to those used in biology and genetics today. It helps students identify and understand the mythological object being studied. Unlike common nouns, adjectives, verbs, prepositions, and so on, which have ordinary diachronic meanings, proper names serve as specialized vocabulary, often technical or social terms that require analysis. As newly coined neologisms, they are not typically defined in dictionaries. The initial capital letter signals to the student to analyze, classify, and characterize the term, aiding in better identification and understanding. Since many individuals share the name John, it is necessary to know their parentage to accurately identify a specific John. By situating a mythological object along a vertical diachronic array of objects, a genealogy, and a horizontal synchronic array of similar objects, its siblings, one can accurately pinpoint where the two arrays intersect. A mythological object shares characteristics with its parents and siblings and passes some of those traits to its children. When mythographers say that Cadmus is the son of Agenor, they mean that Cadmus belongs to the Agenor lineage of objects. It is an Agenor-type object. The mythographer aims to describe an object's appearance, composition, function, origin, and the other objects it has inspired. An object's consort, whether wife or husband, reveals its most frequent combination. However, an object may have several other partners, as it can be combined with various objects. We have produced at least two plausible interpretations of Cadmus. It could refer to a divided or broken vessel, or it could signify a jeweler. Cadmus's father, Agenor, may help us select the correct meaning, at least theoretically. Agenor exists in Greek as an adjective. Homer uses it to describe individuals who are manly, heroic, or headstrong and arrogant. In Pindar, around the beginning of the 5th century BC, its meaning slightly shifted towards stately, magnificent, lavish, abundant, or excessive, referring to salary, wealth, praise, or negative behaviors such as boasting, vaunting, or bombast. The replacement of the Doric alpha with the Ionic and Attic eta is a well-known and common dialectal variation. In Doric, Agenor could be interpreted as a fusion of agan, meaning very, very much, too much, with anor, meaning unseasonable, untimely, immature, or ugly. The Doric fusion, Agenor, could be transcribed in Attic as Agenor, retaining the same meaning, very immature or very ugly. The morphology of the word is even finer. The first three letters form a gi, meaning breakage, fragment, or wound. A gi gives us an attested example of the Doric alpha to eta conversion. The subsequent stem, gene, is associated with the earth's products and is glossed with the verb elo, meaning to shut in, protect, prevent, assemble, bind fast. The word ends with the stem nor, which relates to efficiency, effectiveness, and the extremes, such as lowest, smallest, greatest, etc. Thus, Agenor is read as the best protection for earthly products from breaking. There is yet another significant stem hidden within the term. The sequence eta, nu, omega is the root of a rare old verb, anoga, converted into enoga in Attic. Anoga means to command, to order. Agenor thus becomes an even more precise expression of the concept. It does not refer to earthly products in general, but to the ordered earthly products, the commands placed by the customers. We have identified three potential meanings for Agenor. Which one fits best with the potential meaning of Cadmus? The sememes wealth, luxury, immaturity, and ugliness align very well as the fathers of the jeweler. The compound meaning of the best protection of ordered earth products from damage, derived from a finer morphological analysis of the term, would make the most sense for Agenor as the father of an intact, solid, breakage and leakage-proof vessel. Nevertheless, we still cannot exclude Cadmus being a jeweler, born for the needs of rich or ugly people. There may be two objects named Cadmus, one related to jewelry, the other to pottery. However, the concepts of wealth and luxury, along with those of immaturity and ugliness, correspond to the context of Cadmean letters as writings by affluent children practicing the alphabet with smudging materials at school, as we shall see. A probable Aramaic cognate of Agenor is the stem agn, pronounced hagen, which denotes a bowl, pitcher, or bowl-shaped object, similar to one of the Greek interpretations of Cadmus. This finding is reassuring, as it validates the prediction that Cadmus, and consequently his father, belong to a category of pottery terms, rendering Agenor more generic and abstract. However, the myth that Agenor was the father of Cadmus does not hold in Aramaic, since AGN refers to a pot-like object, while KDM pertains to a jeweler. This inconsistency, along with the morphological and semantic sophistication of the Greek terms, suggests that the words Agenor and Cadmus, as well as the myth that links them, were developed in the Greek language. AGN and KDM are more likely to have been borrowed from Greek, although separately, at different times, and from distinct literary contexts. Unfortunately, the public documentation of Aramaic and other ancient languages lags far behind that of Greek. Consider these statements a working hypothesis rather than proof. No related stems could be found in Egyptian or Sanskrit. Let us now examine the name of Cadmus's mother, Telephaassa. One of the spellings, likely the oldest and most authentic, features a double A. The prefix tele is well known and still used with the meanings far off, at a distance, to a distance, far from, afar. The stem FAA is a typical derivative of the verb pheno in Homer. This verb generally means to appear, but many of its uses relate to transferring information, to make known, reveal, disclose, show, make it clear, display, set forth, or expound notions, inform, give information, call up, proclaim, order, decree something officially, etc. All these needs gave birth to Cadmus. The ending assa has existed as an independent word since Homer. It is the Ionic epic form of tis, t, or ostis, which means that, anyone who, anything which. Combined, these semimes render Telephaassa as anyone who, or anything that, transmits information from afar. Cadmus's mother represented a need to transmit information from afar. This encapsulates the need to write. One of Cadmus's brothers was Cilix. According to Herodotus, Cilix gave his name to the Cilicians. Similarly, later authors claim that Cilix settled in and named Cilicia. Such vague statements are prone to misinterpretation. Anything related to Cilix could be termed Cilician. The place associated with Cilix could be referred to as Cilicia, just as we call a winery the place where wine is found, a butchery the place established by a butcher, or a bakery which is run by a baker. This kind of circular definition does not enhance the understanding of a term, particularly when it comes to a proper name, which remains untranslated. There are at least 2 Greek homophones, or near homophones, of Cilix regarding pottery. Cilix, written with a double lambda, signifies a stamnos. This is a large earthen jar or bottle with 2 handles and a lid for racking off wine. Cilix, written with upsilon and 1 lambda, refers to a cup, particularly a wine cup. A similar Aramaic root, kyl, means measure or measurer. A cup could have been used to measure liquids in antiquity, as it is today. Therefore, the spelling could determine whether the vessel was used for measuring, consuming, or racking off a liquid, in this case, wine. Whether there was any phonetic difference between a single and a double lambda, or between upsilon and iota in ancient Greek, remains a topic of debate. Nevertheless, this exemplifies a case where spelling may be associated with the form of the referent. We should be able to decipher the properties of the referent once we have fully understood the use of archaic Greek letters as iconic symbols. For example, the name kappa meant water distribution, and the symbol K represented a distribution or collection node, depending on the letter's position at the beginning or end of a stem. Lambda means handle, and the lowercase letter represents a handle. A name spelt with double lambda signifies an object with more than one handle. The double lambda of Cilix emphasizes the two handles of a stamnos, which are essential due to the size and weight of this type of vessel. A wine cup may also have two handles, though these are somewhat decorative. A cup is usually handled with one hand, whereas a wine vessel with a stem does not truly require an additional handle. The stem Cilic of Cilix is a symmetric letter sequence formed by the agglutination of Cil with its inverse, lic. Cil features a stem initial kappa, meaning distribution, while lic contains a stem final kappa, meaning collection. The stamnos, signified by Cilix, functions to distribute liquid and collect leftovers for recycling, a role reflected in the symmetric morphology of the stem. The upsilon of Cilix emphasizes the Y shape of stemware, typical of wine-drinking vessels, characterized by a thin stem under a basin. Watch the dedicated presentations for details about the iconicity of kappa, lambda, upsilon, and the other Greek letters. An opposition created by the inversion of Cil, from Cilix to lic, is that between the cup and its liquid or liquor content, despite the corrupted spelling of the latter two. If we had Cilix cups for drinking wine in our time, these would have been found in abundance in a modern Greek kilikio, which is a bar. The wine drinkers who utilize such cups, or the bar owners and attendants, could have been referred to as Cilicians or Cilicians in Latin. The semantic scanning of the term kilikio reveals its fine meaning as the place where people beseech to let the processed grain matter flow into the cup until they go to sleep. This is poetry. The original meaning of the term epic poetry is word creation, from epos, word, and peo, to make, produce, create, bring into existence, compose, write. Epic poetry was a word creation exercise. Do you remember the definition of the Cilicians by Herodotus? He states that they were previously called Hyperchaeans. This term is a hapax legomenon, having never appeared again in Greek literature and being rarely found in dictionaries. The well-known prefix hip stems from the Homeric adverb or preposition hypo, which is also attested as hyper or hip. It is still used to designate a subordinate grade in a hierarchical classification, generally meaning under, beneath, or a lower position in relation to something or someone else. However, among its uses, we also find notions such as under the influence of, under compulsion, or stress of, by the power, force, agency, or means of, caused by, because of. The central theme of Herodotus's alleged ethnonym is almost always circularly associated with the province Achaia and its inhabitants, or the prominent Greek tribe participating in the Trojan War. However, there is a key to a more learned definition. The common feminine noun, Achaia, is glossed with erithos and etymologized from akos, pain, distress, anguish, in Homer, always of the mind. Erithos means day laborer, hired servant, of mowers or reapers, spinsters, weavers, workers in wool, servants, ministers, etc. A related term, erithia, means labor for wages, and is also used pejoratively for non-noble activities of higher professionals. Therefore, Hyperchaeans refers to a lower class of workers who had the habit of going to a bar for a cup of wine during or after work. Those wine drinkers were later named Cilicians, from the name of the wine cup. The Achaeans were not a nation, but a social class. The digraph EU is one of the most common in Greek. It functions as a prefix, forming over 2,400 compound words. As an independent noun, it is the neuter form of EUS. The latter, when used as a suffix, creates another 600 compounds. Their primary sememe is well, or everything good. In compounds, they convey abundance, prosperity, or ease. The observation that words containing EU, either as a prefix or suffix, are associated with water leads to the hypothesis that U originally meant water or water source, akin to the English well. The presence of water already implies abundance, prosperity, and ease. For instance, it will be revealed that Zeus means rainwater, created with the assistance of a Z-shaped thunderbolt. However, this hypothesis is gradually being substantiated in other presentations. Ropi, or the Doric version Ropa, is the feminine form of ropos, which denotes petty wares. Our museums are filled with small kitchen and toilet items, as well as toys made from clay. Europa thus qualifies as both the daughter of Agenor, an earthenware artifact, and as a sister of Cadmus, the pot. The combination of ropi with EU, signifying water, endows Europa with the meaning of small water container pottery, such as water cups, water jars, watering cans, and so forth. Even if Europa referred to trinkets made from materials other than clay, she would not be the sister of Cadmus the jeweler, but rather his daughter. The association of Europa with a color mixture is also noteworthy, as a great deal of pottery was painted in antiquity. As a pottery coat, Europa would make a very dear sister for Cadmus pottery. According to our working hypothesis that EU signifies water, Europa would represent a mixture of water colors, that is, colors dissolved in water and washed out by water. If this is the case, the myth that Zeus abducted Europa could be interpreted as rainwater washing away the paint. Let us delve deeper into this fascinating riddle. We already have two working hypotheses. Zeus represents the clear, pure rainwater, while Europa signifies watercolors, water-soluble pigments, or stains. We now need to understand the transformation of the rainwater into a white bull, which translates as Taurus in Greek. This likely refers to a white-looking solution, or a solution of a white substance capable of removing stains and pigments or enhancing their solubility in water. The best candidate is lime water, an alkaline, cloudy white solution that saponifies fats, neutralizes acids, and removes or alters certain pigments. It is a calcium hydroxide solution made from limestone, that is, chalk, dissolved in water with the addition of carbon dioxide. Other candidates include a mixture of chalk and kaolin, which produces a milky suspension in water used as a primitive clay cleanser due to its ability to absorb pigments, or a mixture of lime and casein, a milk protein, which yields white binders used in wall painting and can lift watercolors. The lime water explanation is preferred because of the presence of the word Taurus in the riddle. Taurus is, of course, not a bull in this context. This term consists of an initial tau, the archaic plus sign, and the stem from aura, meaning air in motion, wind, blow, breeze coming from a watercourse, breath, exhalation. The initial meanings of the English wind included force, agency, influence, driving force of a vessel on water. Exhalation primarily consists of carbon dioxide. There is chalk in all three preparations mentioned above. However, the riddle explicitly states a white substance in water plus exhalation, designated as plus aura, tau aura, or tar os. Herodotus was correct to assert that it was specifically the Cretans who carried off Europa. The component of lime-based solvents that absorbs pigments and stains is chalk. The word for chalk is a homophone of the toponym Crete in more than 40 European languages, including Latin, Romance, Slavic, Germanic, and non-Indo-European tongues. The name of the famous island, Crete, was likely coined by Roman geographers around 500 years after Herodotus and 800 years after Homer and Hesiod, all of whom use this term to refer to chalk. The Europa pigments and stains were removed by the carbonated lime transformation of the rainwater Zeus and went to, or were absorbed by, the chalk component, that is, Crete. The union of Europa with the transformed Zeus produced King Minos of Crete, which probably means chalk mining or chalk miner. Minos uses inno-type buckets, as evidenced by the middle stem of the term, to empty, carry off, and clear out the ore for commercial purposes. According to the myth, Minos became a judge of the underworld. His job was to go underground and judge which rock was valuable and which was not. The color and lime water also gave birth to a color stirrer branch, Rhadamanthus, which also functioned underground or underwater. Unlike his two brothers, their third child, Sarpedon, was not a judge of the underworld. He was a broom or brush for sweeping or painting, for protection or pleasure. His name was borrowed in French to form the word serpillière, a mop, for floor washing. We have arrived at the root of the Phoenicians, Phoenix, the son of Agenor and brother of Cadmus, Cilix, and Europa. Mainstream etymologists rely on a superficial interpretation of the Phoenician myths and consider Phoenix both a personal name and an ethnonym referring to the people of Phoenicia, encompassing modern-day Lebanon and Canaan as defined by geographers of the 1st century AD. Among the most frequently cited propositions for the origin of Phoenix is the Mycenaean Greek term ponikio, which relates to the date palm fruit or an unspecified commodity, aromatic substance, or spice. However, it is important to note that the palm tree is not native to Greece. Others suggest the Middle Egyptian word fenku, meaning woodcutters or carpenters, which refers to the people of Syria who supplied wood for Egypt. A third hypothesis proposes that Phoenix is genuinely Greek and pertains to a red color, either blood red or a wine red, such as the Tyrian purple produced from at least 1200 BC, according to archaeological findings. Thus, the Phoenicians are believed to have been renowned for producing this luxury dye from mollusks for priests and kings. There has also been a suggestion that Canaan meant red in one of the languages in the region, and that the Greek Phoenix, or Phoenician, referred to its inhabitants for that reason. This idea has been abandoned, as Canaan has neither an established etymology nor an established meaning. Whichever the syllogism, these etymologies assume that Phoenix and its derivatives undoubtedly refer to the geographical region of the Levant. Another etymology links the term phoenix with the homonymous mythical bird, which burns itself but rises anew from its ashes. However, that theory sees no connection with the ethnonym Phoenician and does not explain what phoenix means. In nearly all of the 133 words beginning with phi omicron iota, this stem is usually followed by tau, t, beta, b, or nu, n. The few exceptions are either misspellings or variants of other words. This intriguing pattern suggests a very specific meaning for the initial cluster, pho-e, allowing only 3 alternative letters to follow. In contrast, a word initial omicron iota can be followed by almost any letter. Unfortunately, there is no attested independent word pho-e in Greek. However, there is a near homophone in English, fee, meaning money paid, land rights, possession, or rewards. Fee has retained its broad meanings both diachronically, since Old English, and synchronically across Europe, despite minor variations in spelling and pronunciation. Could the ancient Greek phui be a cognate of the English fee? By definition, cognates need to retain not only similar pronunciation, but also similar meanings. The modern Greek and English pronunciations, for which we have hard evidence, are almost identical, varying only in the length of the E vowel. The ancient pronunciations remain hypothetical, therefore, they are not directly comparable. Nevertheless, judging by the various spellings, there appears to be no greater variation between the ancient Greek pho and the Old English pheo than there is among modern and ancient European cognates of phi. Let us gather the potential sememes we extract through a semantic pairing of words initiated with FOI to see if we can deduce an overall elementary meaning for this stem. All the ancient Greek words beginning with feet are derivatives of the two most commonly used synonym verbs, phi-tau or phi-tazo, which mean to go to and fro, roam widely about, go somewhere frequently, wait, resort to others, teachers, or friends. They often pertain to imported goods, which may frequently be out of stock. A particularly informative noun, phi-ti-tis, consists of phi and tt, from the verb ti-taumai, signifying a want, a desire to possess or do something, a wish for, a lack or deficiency of something. There is a sense of want among the sememes of the leading verbs. For instance, some users evoke the behavior of an addict in want, or someone who is desperately searching for something. There is also a notion of an intermittent event conveyed by the graphic semantics of tt. This stem may be visually perceived as long intervals, denoted by eta, punctuated by the perpendicular lines of tau. Tau, which is also written as a plus sign, denotes a point in space or time. The equivalent Semitic letter name tau means mark or sign. Unless circularly defined with the proper theonym Phoebus, epithet of Apollo the archer, words commencing with Phoebe are either cognates of Phoebao, meaning cleanliness or purity, or cognates of Phoebazo, which relates to inspiration and prophecy. Apollo is also inspired and capable of prophesying, as evidenced by his oracle at Delphi, a fact reflected in the terminal phi of the toponym. Cleanliness and purity are semantically linked to inspiration and prophecy, as the clarity of an observation correlates to theorizing about its causes and predicting its effects. It all revolves around insight and knowledge. Furthermore, Phoebao and Phoebazo also serve as glosses for each other, functioning as synonyms. Prophesy literally means prediction, derived from the verb pheme, to think, deem, suppose, and say in advance. In English, it is akin to profession, proficiency, and professor. A predictable event is something regular, obeying a rule. Therefore, we have observed thus far a regular phi and a desired intermittent phi. If the Greek phi is a cognate of the English phi, meaning money, payment, property, possessions, then phoebao would signify having a predictable, regular income, whereas phi-tau would indicate being in want of income and seeking work or charity. Out of 90 Greek words starting with phen, 20 are defined circularly with phoenix or Phoenicia, rendering them uninformative. Another 18 are associated with the date palm. The palm tree was likely named after the color of its fruit, which ranges from red and brown to crimson and purple. Crimson is a rich, deep red color with a hint of purple. Originally, it referred to the hue of the kermes dye, derived from a scale insect of the genus Kermes, but the term is now sometimes used more broadly to describe slightly bluish-red shades that lie between red and rose. Venus blood is crimson. For centuries, crimson dyes have been favored for garments by kings, emperors, and the upper class. An additional crimson or purple object is the writing ink, which we will address later. Half of the words beginning with phen, specifically 45 lemmas, are glossed with one or more of these colors: red, blood red, crimson, or purple. It is tempting to assume that the words subtly glossed with phoenix, Phoenician, or Phoenicia also refer to objects within that color palette. The most common representation of a crimson hue is red wine. It is highly likely that phoenix and its derivatives referred to red wine. This hypothesis presents Phoenix as the beloved sibling of Cilix, who seems to represent pottery designed and used primarily for wine. If this is true, Phoenicia could signify the vineyard or winery, while the Phoenicians might be viewed as wine producers, merchants, or consumers. This idea could elucidate why Eumaeus's father had a Phoenician woman in his household in Syra, referred to as Phoenicia, who was abducted and killed by Phoenician merchants, as recounted by Eumaeus in the Odyssey. She was not an immigrant from Phoenicia. A Phoenicia might refer to a female wine enthusiast who ventured to the harbor to purchase wine, along with Europa trinkets sold by the Phoenician merchants from the ferry. She could have been lured by the wine merchants and abused under the influence of the drink. Nevertheless, a more compelling explanation lies ahead. The Greek word for wine is enos. Ignoring the generic ending os, an enclitic demonstrative pronoun, meaning this, that, he, or a relative pronoun, who or which, leaves us with "een" as the root that designates the actual referent object. That's the wine. The current phonocentric syllabification is inconsistent with the words morphology and semantics. This term has also been attested with an initial digamma. The Roman polymath Marcus Terentius Varro, who lived in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC, mentioned digamma as the ancestor of Latin f. He named it phau. Both digamma, or phau, and f correspond to the Semitic letter war, which is pronounced like an f, v, or the Germanic w. Regardless of whether and how the Greeks pronounced the digamma, the conversion of enos into Latin venum contradicts the theory of an Erasmian ancient pronunciation of oi as a diphthong. Instead, it supports its modern Greek pronunciation with an e. Also note the correspondence between the Greek digamma and its Germanic pronunciation as w. The o is not pronounced in Germanic languages either. The phen from enos is also the root of wine and win, that's victory. This is why wins are celebrated with wine, and winners are typically awarded a ceremonial cup resembling an ancient wine vessel. In archaic Semitic inscriptions, such as Punic and the so-called Phoenician, the word for wine was written with a yod and a nun, equivalent to fn, but read from right to left and pronounced yeen, with a voiced palatal approximant, similar to the English consonant y in year or your. The Semitic yod is graphically identical to digamma. Since digamma occupied the 6th position in the Greek alphabet, just as war does in the Semitic alphabet, the F-shaped letter of the word for wine was phonetically interpreted as Y, U, F, V, or W in various languages. The English Y has supplanted the Middle English letter yog, which evolved from Latin G, Semitic gimel, and Greek gamma, representing a voiced palatal fricative sound akin to the English Y. Therefore, it is unsurprising to encounter words for wine beginning with any of these letters, as illustrated here. The Proto-Indo-European root has been reconstructed as uoinar, which is the closest one can get to the stem derived from phoenix. The letter omicron was referred to as U in Plato's era. It was transliterated with U in Latin, and it may have been pronounced U, at least in some Western Greek dialects. A U from digamma, combined with a U from O, forms a double U, that is W. The multitude of adjectives with which the Greeks described wine is reminiscent of the vocabulary used by modern experts. Homer used the term enos to refer to its deep red color. They spoke of sparkling wine, pleasant, sweet, delicious, old, sweet-smelling, fragrant, eliciting cheer and mirth, joyful, cheap, or expensive, that casts a shadow over thought, that tells the truth that wine is knocked out by more wine. They cared about quantity and provided appellations of origin. The term enos was also utilized for the wine market and interchangeably for the wine-drinking cup, Cilix, or should we say Cilix. The inner basin of a Cilix was often adorned on the bottom, revealing an image as the liquid is consumed. This adornment typically features a circular frame. There are numerous variations of the Cilix type, as well as other forms of wine cups, such as the cantharos and the skyphos, that were available during that era. A Rhodian skyphos discovered in a tomb dated to 700 BC at Pithecusae in the Gulf of Naples, Italy, is itself dated to 720 BC. It is called the Cup of Nestor, due to a three-line inscription allegedly referring to the mythological cup described by Homer. Its inscription represents one of the oldest attestations of the Greek alphabet. Cilix cups were also popular exports, as they were the most common pottery imports from Attica discovered in Etruscan settlements. Their decoration often featured animals and letters. Thus far, we have examined the word initial cluster FOI through the semantic pairing of words beginning with feet or Phoebe. FOI likely designates a noble goal or something necessary, such as money, income, possessions, or valuable items akin to the English fee. The archer god Apollo is described as Phoebus because, as an archer, he has a target to aim for. When supplemented solely with the letter N, FOI forms the stem foin for wine and win. Today, to win means to be successful or victorious. However, its earlier meanings primarily revolved around labor, toil, struggle, or work to obtain or secure the daily fee. Toil and wine are intimately linked, not only linguistically, but also in life. Success and victory are celebrated with wine. Thus, foin or oin also refer to the red, crimson, or reddish-purple hue of wine. The ending clusters nix, ix, and the root nick of phoenix, along with the ending morphemes eta for the feminine or os for the genitive, are not random either. The Greek she is a double consonant comprising a k and an s sound. In declension, she loses the s sound and becomes k, leading to the feminine Phoeniki for Phoenicia. The meaning of the stem nick may be easily inferred from the minimal verb nikao or nikio in Ionic, along with its derivative noun niki. Nikao means to win, conquer, prevail, vanquish, be superior, or excel. It thus becomes evident that Phoenix and the Phoenicians, Phoenicians, were not merely those who aspired to something noble, like a phaetis, nor were they even those who had achieved their goals, like a phoebetes. They referred to individuals who excelled in their pursuits. Perhaps it was these elite individuals who brought the alphabet to the Greeks, and Phoenicia embodied that social elite. The palm leaf is a powerful and versatile symbol across many cultures, religions, and historical periods. Its symbolism can vary by context, but some common themes emerge. In ancient Greece and Rome, palm leaves were awarded to victorious athletes and military leaders. A palm branch symbolized success, triumph, and public honor. The Latin expression palma virtuti, the palm for virtue, reflects this association. A golden palm leaf is awarded today as a trophy to the laureates of the Cannes Film Festival because phoenix meant both palm and victory. There has likely been a semantic recombination along the phoenix letter sequence between Greek and English. There is a tendency for metathesis, contraction, and splitting, resulting in shorter and semantically simpler English words, while in Greek, the sememes seem to fuse in series to create longer and more complex terms. The English fee, for example, has separated from the notions of toil and gain by adopting a different pronunciation and transliteration of the same alphabetic sequence. Today, ceremonial wine cups have replaced palm leaves, which are awarded to champions of competitions, and victories are celebrated with the finest available wine. The term phoenix signifies finishing, completion, achievement, excellence, and triumph. However, it is fundamentally associated with a wine cup. The ecclesiastical wine cup used during Christian liturgy likely holds a similar symbolic value. Agenor, the father of Phoenix, encompasses a significant array of concepts related to prompt treatment and effective protection of wounds. The inversion of Telephaassa conveys notions of uncertainty, a desire for clarity, as well as the English root of safety. Current etymology suggests that the English word fee and its European cognates derive from a hypothetical Proto-Indo-European root peku, meaning livestock. It would be more parsimonious and less speculative to propose that fee and its cognates represent various phonetic interpretations of the stem foi by ancient scholars who studied Homer and the classics. The construction of the stem foi, formed from the iconic Greek letters phi, omicron, and iota, along with its precise meaning, will be substantiated in a separate presentation. In brief, the Greek letter phi represents a circle divided into two parts. The circle corresponds to the letter omicron, while the dividing line is denoted by the letter iota. By removing the dividing line from phi, we are left with a complete omicron and an iota. When reading phi from left to right, we transition from a break to integrity. The reverse sequence indicates a shift from integrity to a break in a pejorative sense. Hence, the stem eoph initiates the word eophoros, meaning poison-bearing, and consequently, death. Considering oi as a digraph, the inversion produces the verb epho, which signifies lewdness, and several vulgar cognates with sexual and beastly connotations. Can we reconcile the seemingly disparate meanings of phoenix as the palm tree, the red colors of blood, wine, and the elites, the recurring notions of cleansing, cleanliness, and inspiration, the victory or success after toil, and the wine cups or palm leaves awarded to the winners as a fee? The palm tree is native to Egypt and Mesopotamia. Ample archaeological and literary evidence indicates that the ancient Babylonians and Egyptians produced palm wine from the sap of the tree, which was economically more significant than the wood of its trunk. From palm wine, the Babylonians created vinegar, which is still used as a cleansing agent today. The Egyptians made palm wine by tapping the trunk near its branches to collect the sap, which was then naturally fermented to produce the alcoholic drink. The Ebers Papyrus, a medical document from around 1500 BC, references palm wine as a mood-altering substance, indicating its use in therapeutic contexts. Scientific analyses have confirmed that date palm wine was used as an antiseptic in the embalming process, as evidenced by residues found in canopic jars. The antiseptic is the alcohol found in any type of wine or further distilled spirit, akin to inspiration and cleanliness. Soldiers, athletes, and hard workers are often wounded after striving. The inversion of the stem O-in signifies the absence of alcohol, hence poisonous infection and death. Instead, the crimson colors of blood and wine, donned upon the garments of the clergy, symbolize toil and purity with a sense of sterility. The palm leaves or wine cups awarded to winners, as well as the ceremonial wine offered to communicants after liturgy, symbolize the cleansing of any bodily or spiritual wounds, thus fostering healing and health. The stems foin or oin did not refer to wine as a beverage for pleasure, but to its alcohol content and disinfectant properties. However, alcohol is also recognized as a fast-drying solvent or carrier for dyes and pigments. Today, it is a key ingredient in alcohol-based inks used for calligraphy and illustration, airbrushing and mixed media, or staining glass and ceramics. Although there is no explicit textual or archaeological evidence that alcohol was used as a solvent in ancient ink making, the phoenix dyes and pigments in an alcohol-containing medium might have been known to the ancients as a brother of Europa watercolors for the decoration of their brother Cilix cups or for marking and writing on Cadmus pottery. This represents the interest in studying mythology from a non-theistic perspective. Ix exists independently. However, its definition as a vine parasite is not particularly helpful except for its relationship with the vine and indirectly with wine. There are two minimal nouns beginning with ex that might be more relevant. Exis denotes a direction, a passage, or a correspondence. It derives from the verb eco, to come, be brought, attain to, reach. Thus, Phoenix could refer to those who have reached their goals, such as passing final exams, or to wine that has reached maturity. The most frequent use of ex as a word initial morpheme, both in terms of the number of cognates and attestations, is in ixos, which is used to describe viscous and sticky substances like resins, and metaphorically for skinflint or miserly individuals. A traditional type of white, rosé, or occasionally red wine, called retsina, has been produced in Greece for at least 2,000 years. Its unique flavor is said to have originated from the practice of sealing wine vessels, particularly amphorae, with pine resin in ancient times. Before the invention of impermeable glass bottles, oxygen caused many wines to spoil within a year. Pine resin helped keep air out while infusing the wine with a resin aroma. The Romans began using barrels in the 3rd century AD, removing any enological necessity for resin, but the flavor itself was so popular that the style remains widespread today. Phoenix might well refer to perhaps cheaper wine with resin additives, or to expensive, well-matured wine produced and stored in resin-sealed vessels. However, resins are also utilized as additives in writing inks. For this type of ink ingredient, there exists both literature and analytical evidence from archaeological specimens. According to Dioscorides and Pliny, oak gum has historically been used as a binding agent for ink or paint. Similar to mastic and other sticky plant gums, it may function as a binder in inks or pigments for manuscripts, particularly when combined with other substances. Alcohol is generally a much more effective solvent for resins than water, especially for natural plant resins. Most resins, such as pine resin, copal, frankincense, myrrh, or mastic, are insoluble or only slightly soluble in water but are soluble in alcohols, especially ethanol. Resin-alcohol mixtures have been historically employed to bind pigments or produce glossy finishes. These observations lead us to a final hypothesis that Phoenix meant finish, metaphorically referring to those who reach their goals, the hard-working, the pure, and healthy, but primarily for the final coating of pottery, including decoration and writing with pigments and inks. The Phoenicians were, therefore, the finishers of pottery who brought the alphabet to Greece. Cadmus was the black ink made of soot for casual writing, and it was the cheap, water-soluble black ink that led the Phoenicians who founded schools for the young, Thebes. When the stem Thebes escapes the anachronistic interpretation of the city of Thebes, it connotes youth, around adolescence, youthful prime, until manhood. Europa represented the various watercolors, while Phoenix was the more complex crimson-purple ink, incorporating solvents and stabilizers used in manuscripts. The Phoenicia woman mentioned by Eumaeus in the Odyssey was neither a Phoenician immigrant from Phoenicia nor an alcohol addict. She was most probably responsible for house cleaning, or Eumaeus's wealthy father's nurse, using alcohol as a disinfectant. She would have gone to the harbor to purchase cleaning utensils such as Europa water trinkets, vinegar for cleansing, or alcohol for wounds. According to the Scholia on Dionysius Thrax, the Greek letters were not invented all at once, but rather gradually, with different individuals adding letters at various times. The most appealing theory relates to Euphronios, a Greek vase painter and potter from Athens, who lived around 500 BC. Euphronios was instrumental in the transition of pottery painting from the black figure to the red figure technique. He was among the earliest and most influential potters to utilize the red figure method and the first known artist in history to have legibly signed his work. According to Euphronios, as Dionysius states, the letters were called Phoenician because they were written with red earth, red ochre, or ruddle, and were hence red. In English, a word terminal ix morpheme denotes an additive or accessory. Some of the most frequent nouns ending in she derive from verbs ending in iso or iso. Here, we have examples of the correspondence between a double sigma or a zeta in verbs and an she ending in their derivative nouns. Although no verb pheniso has been attested, we may safely presume that the final she of phoenix corresponds to a double sigma, because the feminine of phoenix is Phoenicia, which is already attested in Homer. Mutations among double S, Z, and X are observed both between and within other languages. The most significant examples in this context are the verbs nisome, meaning to come and go, a palindromic motion typical of cleaning or polishing a surface, and nizo, to wash the hands, feet, or other parts of a person's body, to wash off, purge, cleanse, and clean objects like tables, etc. Nizo forms compounds primarily used in prose. It is therefore possible that the verb phenizo or pheniso was formed, meaning to finish in the sense of cleaning and covering or coating a skin or other surface. Although the Greek letter she is generally retained in Latin as x, the Latin x may transform to a double s, occasionally appearing as cs or sc spellings. It is worth noting that the lowercase she resembles a double final, or Byzantine sigma. Here, we have some examples of mutations from a Greek zeta into a Latin double s, and from a Latin z to a Romance double s. A lowercase zeta also resembles an elongated Byzantine sigma. As the Latin alphabet used in Europe lacks signs for a long or double s, the increased lengths of zeta and she, perceived as atypical sigmas, were graphically represented with s gemination. A confusion between the cursive Greek zeta and xi emerged by the 2nd century BC. By the 8th century AD, zeta and xi had become indistinguishable in Greek manuscripts. Scribes copying Greek documents could therefore confuse zeta with xi, interpreting both as a double S. According to the hypothesis proposed above, that h and the Greek eta signify length, a lengthy Greek sigma, which is zeta or xi, could be graphically romanized as esh. Some Middle English scribes began writing the voiceless postal viola fricative sound esh as ish, even in cases where a geminated s existed. The inversion of Phoenix produces the stem xin. By converting the initial xi to esh in European languages, either phonetically or graphically, we arrive at the stem shin, which is transliterated with an initial c in Italian or ch in French and other Romance languages. The French shin was borrowed into English as chin, an obsolete form of China. The toponym China was first used in Europe in the 1550s by Marco Polo and is of uncertain origin. China was already renowned for its pottery technologies, which developed in that country approximately 2,000 to 1,200 years ago, as well as for its inks. The Greek term chiniki melani refers to the simplest black ink made from soot in water, known as Chinese ink or Indian ink in English. This Greek term features an initial sigma, reborrowed from the Latinized form of China with s, while the remainder of the word matches precisely the term Phoeniki. It is now believed that Siniki means Chinese and melani means ink. Initially, however, melani signified black, which leaves Siniki with the meaning ink. The sequence inik from Phoeniki has probably given rise to the English word ink for the dye, whilst its inversion resulted in the term king for the people who could afford those dyes for their dresses. The final G of king probably derives from the F or digamma of Phoeniki, as explained earlier. Several borrowings from Old French and other European languages began to be spelt with sh, while the earlier form featured a double S. The reverse phenomenon is also noted. Words spelt with double S or even with C are pronounced as if they contained sh. Passion and Phoenician are typical examples. The fossilized pronunciation of the term Phoenician with esh reveals an older double S, substituting the final she in Phoenix. Had Phoenix been phonetically transcribed, it would have sounded like Finnish. Finnish provides a compelling meaning for phoenix. This pertains to the ceramic glaze that makes pottery impermeable to liquids, resistant to pollution, and aesthetically pleasing. The simplest and oldest type of traditional ceramic glaze is the ash glaze. Ash glazing has been documented in China since around 1500 BC. It consists of wood ash mixed with water and clay, resulting in a paste-like texture before firing and a viscous, sticky texture during firing. Hence, the viscosity of the material is reflected in the terminating stem IX. After firing, the glaze achieves a glass-like quality and a pooling appearance, which enhances the surface texture of the glazed piece. The hypothesis that Phoenix signifies ash glaze finish aligns coherently not only with its mythical lineage and its association with alphabetic writing as a form of pottery decoration, but also with the riddle of the mythical phoenix as an immortal bird rising from its ashes. Originating in Greek mythology, it has parallels in various cultures, including Egyptian and Persian mythologies. A phoenix gains new life by ascending from the ashes of its predecessor. Some legends assert that it perishes in a spectacle of flames and combustion, while others suggest that it simply dies and decomposes before being reborn. Ash glaze was likely discovered by chance when ash from the burnt wood in the kiln fell onto pots. This process is known as natural glazing. Chinese potters evidently realized that the ash covering the pieces resulted in the glaze. Thus, they began adding the ash as a glaze prior to placing the pot in the kiln. Many traditional East Asian potters continue to utilize ash glazing, which has seen a significant revival in studio pottery in both the West and East. It was posited above that inverting a letter sequence should provide additional information about the signified object, typically describing an opposite or even an antonym. Before concluding, let us revisit the Phoenician family and read the names in reverse. This exercise should assist in confirming, rejecting, or refining the hypotheses generated by our forward semantic scanning. We have identified Cadmus as a smeared piece of pottery, probably coated with a greasy or sticky substance that renders it impermeable and preserves the contents from spoiling or escaping. It may also bear markings for content information, volume, and price. Such vessels would be employed for food storage or commerce. The inversion of Cadmus is somdak. Som forms somphos, meaning spongy, porous, while dak forms dakrio, meaning to weep, shed tears. This description is an antonym of a compact, non-porous, impermeable object, as predicted by our forward reading. The reverse reading of Agenor reveals strength and good health, rather than bearing wounds that require prompt cleansing and treatment with alcohol. It also suggests the idea of acquiring something new without losing sleep over the fear that it might deteriorate, in contrast to a broken vessel when read forwards. A forward reading of Telephaassa reveals something or someone that transmits information. A reverse reading illustrates uncertainty, obscurity, and a desire for clarity. Additionally, it characterizes a naive, simplistic, and unsophisticated individual who risks being overtaken by charlatans, falling victim to scams, or simply forgetting, neglecting, or disregarding unwritten matters. The reverse of Europa, the watercolors, confirms that these derive from digging and mining, and that one must take care to dissolve them completely, as repulsion against the solvent may cause lumps and losses. The reverse reading of Cilix and Cilix provides evidence of errors in spelling or interpretation, as well as semantic shifts between Greek and Aramaic or English. The Greek stem, written with 2 iotas and 1 lambda, is found in illis, meaning volume. Therefore, Cilix pertains to volume measurement, and the Cilicians are volume measurers, whether as objects or individuals. The inverse of Cilix, written with upsilon, forms ilis, meaning dregs or sediment. This concept is the opposite, if not the antonym, of the clear wine that is consumed. The sediment is left over and goes to the stamnos, Cilix, with double lambda for recycling. Incidentally, before inversion, the central stem of Cilix yields the verb ilizo, to filter, strain, refine, and the stem begins with the funnel-shaped letter Y. In Aramaic, however, the root written with Y denotes a measure or measurer. There is no obvious Aramaic root corresponding to the Greek kil with iota. The inversion of the Greek stem, lik, corresponds to the Aramaic root lk, meaning to lick, licking. Either the English to lick is of Semitic origin, or the Aramaic lk is a borrowing from an Indo-European language. A lick, defined as a light coating or quick application of something, especially paint, aligns with the concept of impermeability. In Greek, however, this is a property of Cadmus, not Cilix. In English, to lick also means to beat, surpass, overcome, akin to winning. But these are semantic properties of Phoenix. While the forward reading of Phoenix offers insights into writing, toil, wound treatment, pottery glazing, and inks, the reverse reading reveals its opposites: stimulation of thought related to writing, but primarily to reading, skin pain, exemplified by a splinter, and China, renowned for its pottery and inks. The inversion may involve the awkward double consonant shi and the digraph oi, or it may not. Although the English word skin appears as the first part of a compound term by Hippocrates, skin dalamos, meaning skin damage, its current etymology does not account for these attestations. If the terminal digamma of the inverted sequence can be transliterated to a Germanic G, as suggested by the attested evidence, then the inverted Greek phoenix may be the origin of the Germanic cognates of king, referring to a person who dons garments dyed with crimson dyes. The Greek term Phoenicians referred to various social classes in different historical and literary contexts during the first millennium BC. It was only used as an ethnonym to define a people residing in the Levant by Roman writers in the 1st century AD. Initially, the term described seafarers and merchants of wine and trinkets who occasionally behaved maliciously upon reaching a port. In Herodotus, their name as the Red People relates to piracy in the Red Sea. However, anyone working with red, crimson, or purple materials could be called a Phoenician, including potters and writers. The latter are described as a leading intellectual elite. The concept begins with pottery as a medium for writing and the need to transmit information across distances in space and time. The clay medium was termed Agenor, and the transmission of information at a distance, Telephaassa. The combination of these two foundational concepts led to applications such as pottery marking, Cadmus, watercolors, inks, and inscribed petty wares, Europa, as well as decorated drinking cups, plates, and storage jars for public consumption, Cilix. This also fostered the emergence of high-end pottery artists and writers, Phoenicians, who eventually became a social elite because they understood the letters and could read and write. Marked pottery, Cadmus, combined with the idea of a fixed unit of volume or mass, harmonia, resulted in an array of standard volume vessels for various uses. Buckets for transferring liquid from a large reservoir to customers, eno. Cups for sowing seeds uniformly, semele. Water flasks and watering cans, polydorus. Vessels for weighing, storing, or transporting dry foods, agave, as well as ropes, hanging containers, and wick lamps, Autonoe and her husband, Aristeas. Cadmea is a smearing material related to pottery marking. Cadmus and Cadmea lent their names to Cadmean letters, which are presumably erasable, thus non-permanent. It can be inferred that Thebes, mythically founded by Cadmus, refers to the use of writing materials such as chalk, coal, graphite, or soot for educational purposes in schools. As Thebes is in Boeotia, if Thebes is a school of education, then Boeotia represents childhood. Cadmean letters are also used in the marketplace for annotating containers with their content, volume, and price, writing menus in restaurants, providing temporary instructions, etc. In contrast, Phoenix gave its name to baked and glazed permanent letters. These writings must not be erased. Therefore, the Phoenician letters represent the writings of authors, lawmakers, administrators, record keepers, statesmen, and so on. Finally, Cilicia and the Cilicians are closely tied to the wine industry and related social groups. Herodotus's term Hyperchaeans provides a clue to understanding a prominent Hellenic tribe. The Achaeans represent the working class. In no instance does the myth refer to geographical regions or nations. These notions were created in the 1st century AD and later by Roman geographers who assigned names to provinces and their inhabitants inspired by mythology. Ancient geographers like Strabo, Pliny, and Pausanias often used mythology as a framework to interpret or label real-world places. They didn't separate myth and history the way modern scholars do. This issue has been discussed in modern scholarship and is termed mythical cartography or topographical myth. There were neither religious nor metaphysical notions in the mythical narrative. King Minos of Crete, the judge of the underworld, was none other than a chalk miner. He extracted limestone to transform ordinary Zeus water into a white limewater solution, a powerful cleanser, by exhaling carbon dioxide into it. This solution could abduct Europa colors and other water-resistant stains. His brothers, the stirrer Rhadamanthus and the mop Sarpedon, were essential tools for preparing the solution and applying it to surfaces that required cleansing. We have applied a novel reading method for proper mythological names, which are initiated with a capital letter. The idea is to read short letter sequences, usually 3 letters, moving from left to right, 1 letter at a time, so as to identify and etymologize all possible informative stems in the word. We have documented only a couple of examples where inversion of a letter sequence produces a semantic opposition, but this phenomenon is too common to be explained by chance. Therefore, a reverse semantic scanning should reveal additional pertinent information. We have also seen a few examples of how abstract and straightforward symbolic signs may be used as iconic letters for word construction, and how the semantic pairing of words reveals meanings for individual letters, just as phonetic pairing reveals phonemes. These ideas are further explored in 2 long series of presentations, one about the Greek letter names, the other about mythology. The analysis of Phoenician myths suggests that these myths are riddles that require morphological and semantic analysis of their constituent terms. It is predicted that all mythology serves the same educational purposes. The mythological genealogies serve as ontologies and classifications that test the predictions of alternative hypotheses generated by linguistic analysis. The application of ethnological, geographical, and theological notions to mythology written in the 1st millennium BC is anachronistic. Geography, ethnology, and theology were inventions of late antiquity. Instead, any heroes, monsters, tribes, regions, or gods mentioned by mythographers are technological inventions, work and living places, social classes, professions, and institutions. The Phoenician myths are about the parallel histories of pottery and writing technologies.